Hello, and welcome to the lucky 13th installment of Goss Reads Goss, Menace in the Goldilocks Zone. If you have been following along, you will recall that last chapter we met a character named Rotvine who works glass and makes beautiful objects out of glass, or did. Alas, he reports he's no longer able to do so, as there's no call for these objects anymore. At any rate, he ends up at the freighter to see the Mare Urban glass that Roger picked up, and he has invited himself to dinner. So, as we've been doing, I'll read the last few paragraphs of chapter 12, and then begin with chapter 13. Roger encounters Forge Dam on his way off the freighter. "Where's your Arborian friend?" the captain asked conversationally. "He's taking a nap," Roger replies vacantly. "Oh?" The tilt of Forgedam's head indicates that she is puzzled by this information. "And he's evidently joining us for the evening meal." "I see." When no further information appears forthcoming, Forgedam asks, "Does he know anyone looking to sell a vessel?" "Oh, I doubt it," Roger replies. "I sincerely doubt it." So now we begin chapter 13, Broadtrunk's Folly. The last meal of the day is eaten by torchlight, a touch that clearly impresses Rotvine. Peregrine is simply introduced by name, no further explanation offered, and none requested. Roger realizes that none of their rations include Arborian fruit, but not surprisingly, Rotvine is more than satisfied with nectar gel. "We've had not nectar gel in an age, have we, dear?" the Arborian guest says in response to Roger's apology. "No, nectar gel would do quite nicely." He pauses briefly, as if recalling something. "In my time, the Mare Urbans were known for two things: glass and nectar wine. I don't suppose we'll be having any of that tonight." Roger is surprised to see Peregrine translating the remark for the Mare Urbans, upon which Forgedam gives Lutterson a significant look. The latter excuses himself and returns with a pair of 2-liter flasks, which are then shared around the table. "I was wondering," Gatherdam says, after the group had eaten a while, "has our guest ever traveled to Mare Urba?" "Our friends want to know if you've ever been to Mare Urba, grandfather," Peregrine asks. "Been to Mare Urba? No, we've never been to Mare Urba, have we, dear? Nor to Redio or to Cerulia," he says, nodding to Roger. "No, we've never been off-world, have we, dear? No, we haven't." Peregrine translates the response, and the group continues to eat in silence for a time, the 2 flasks making the rounds more than once. "Had a berth on the Folly, though, didn't we, dear?" Rotvine asks abruptly, as if just recalling. "Almost went to Mare Urba, but the Folly never flew." "The Folly?" Roger asks. "Yes, the Folly. Broadtrunk's Folly," Rotvine replies, as if that explains everything. "What is Broadtrunk's Folly?" Roger asks again, as Peregrine translates for the Mare Urbans. "It doesn't know Broadtrunk's Folly, dear. How would it, dear?" Rotvine observes. "Broadtrunk is the chieftain here," he goes on to explain, "and he got in his head once to build a giant vessel, part freighter, part passenger cruiser. His plan was to sell burst Mare Urba and fill the hold with fruit to sell the Mare Urbans. On Mare Urba he would buy nectar wine and glass to carry back and sell at a great profit." "Well, that seems sound," Roger observes. "Where's the folly in that?" "It thinks it's sound, dear. It wants to know where the folly is. Well, it seems young Broadtrunk spent all his money on the vessel. He couldn't buy fuel unless he filled the berths, and he couldn't get fruit unless the farmers would agree to wait until he came back to pay for it. It all seemed very iffy, they said, didn't they, dear? Like an untested vine." "So no one bought berths, and the farmers didn't sell him their fruit?" Roger asks. "Oh, some bought berths. We did, didn't we, dear? But not enough. The trip was postponed, and postponed, and postponed, until Broadtrunk was forced to refund all the fares or lose his position. The vessel never launched." Rotvine helps himself to more nectar, gel, and wine. The rumor now is that the vessel is not space-worthy, so Broadtrunk can't even sell it. Where is this vessel? Fordsham asks after Peregrine's translation, but Peregrine had anticipated her. It's parked right here at the spaceport, Rodvine reports. He's tucked it away out of sight, hasn't he, dear? But it's here. How interesting, Roger says. Indeed, Peregrine agrees. What? Fordsham asks impatiently. What did he say? The vessel is right here, at this spaceport, Roger replies. How interesting, Fordsham observes. Well, thank you all for your kindness, Rodvine announces abruptly. It's time for us to be off, isn't it, dear? Yes, it is. We thank you for the feast and the wine. Safe travels to you. Wait, grandfather, Peregrine protests. Don't you want to wait until morning? You can sleep here. Yes, sleep here, Roger joins in. No, we want to wake up in our own bed, don't we, dear? Yes, we do, the elderly Arborian says as he turns toward the port entrance to leave. Watch the sun light up the river, we will. That we will, dear. We can call you a transport, Roger calls after him. No need, Rodvine calls back. The public safety lads will find us eventually, and they know where we live, don't they, dear? Yes, dear, they certainly do. Where's he going? Norodom asks with a worried expression. Home, Fordsham replies simply. Shouldn't we go after him? Larson asks. He can't walk all the way back to the river. He's arranging for his own transport, Peregrine assures them. The question for us is how to meet this Broadtrunk and get him to sell us his vessel, Fordsham adds. I guess it's time for the Cerulean Admiral to pay the local chieftain a courtesy call, Roger says. Retired Admiral, Fordsham amends. Yes, thank you, Wing Commander. Ooh, why was that necessary? Fordsham asks after wincing. I am giving the point to Roger, Peregrine says, her expression betraying every sign of amusement. So we will arrange for Roger and his entourage to pay a call to Broadtrunk tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, most likely, Roger adds dryly, as it will take Treevine and his cohorts half the day to find us again. I suppose it would be prudent to get a look at this Folly before we went negotiating for it, Fordsham muses. It may not indeed be space-worthy. Well, surely Broadtrunk would not expect us to buy it sight unseen, Roger asserts. Friends, first things first. We don't know whether this Broadtrunk is willing to sell, Peregrine points out. Let's meet the fellow and feel him out. Strongbow evidently hasn't registered the fact that Roger was an admiral at their first meeting, so when he learns of Roger's plan to meet the chieftain, he insists on making up for it by coming along to make the introductions himself, much to Roger's consternation. This necessitates a convoy of 2 transports, one for Strongbow, his entourage, and Roger, and one for Roger's entourage, driven by a petulant Treevine who seems to think he has been demoted by the assignment. For his part, Roger stoically endures the fuss, although that stoicism is tested when he realizes that Strongbow is taking an extremely circuitous route in order to parade his association with the Admiral in front of his fellow citizens. They do arrive at what Strongbow's entourage eventually agrees is Broadtrunk's residence. The portmaster, very self-importantly, dispatches one of them to announce their arrival. Said entourage has just begun speculating on the cause of the minor delay and what it might portend when a member of the chieftain's household appears and announces that Broadtrunk will see the Admiral. Only the Admiral, the Arborian amends sternly, as the whole group prepares to disembark. This, of course, provokes a twitter of consternation among Strongbow and his associates and looks of confusion among the Mare Urbans until Roger translates the remark. In contrast to Strongbow and his hangers-on, Roger's entourage is, to a person, obviously relieved, and they all settle back into their seats on the transport. For his part, Roger allows himself to be led through the ground floor of the house to the rear, where he enters a kind of cage apparently suspended by cables. His guide accompanies him and closes a door behind them. The guide then manipulates a set of controls, and after an initial jolt, Roger realizes that the cage is rising. Like the hoist for my skiff back home, he thinks to himself, which provokes an unexpected pang of longing to be under sail on an open sea, under an open sky. He shakes the emotion off just as the cage jolts to a halt at what appears to be the building's rooftop, under an open, arboreal sky. The guide opens the door and gestures to Roger to disembark. Roger does so, and is greeted by a large Arborean with dark fur tinged with silver at the face and head. He is wearing a tunic of somber dark burgundy. "Admiral Roger, is it?" "Yes, and you are Chieftain Broadtrunk?" "Yes. Please forgive the unorthodox reception," the chieftain says, gesturing for Roger to accompany him away from the hoist. "As much as I love my people, I find the older I get, the more I feel Arborean society to be a many-headed beast with a surfeit of ears and mouths, but with a paucity of brains. It can make rational discourse extremely trying." Roger is about to agree wholeheartedly when prudence prompts him to take another tack. "I have been here but 2 days," Roger says politely, "so I will have to take your word in that regard." "What do you think of the view?" Broadtrunk asks, gesturing around them. "I have not visited Cerulia, but when I was younger I studied the cultures of the other worlds and learned that your people live unsheltered in the open air." "Yes, that is true," Roger confirms, "and the view," he adds sincerely, "is spectacular. There's a better view of the great forest river from here than from the bank itself." "My people fear the open air," Broadtrunk says a little sadly. "It's instinctive, of course, as we evolved being preyed upon from the sky, but it holds us back, as fear always does." "Is it the sky terrors your people fear?" Broadtrunk looks at Roger with some surprise. "You've heard of them?" "Only in passing. Some of the spaceport workers mentioned them. They said the Mare Urbans reminded them of sky terrors." The chieftain grins derisively. "Those simpletons," he says. "Not a one of them has ever seen a sky terror." He pauses as if struck by a thought. "Would you like to see one? I assure you it's perfectly safe." "What?" "Well, yes, I suppose so. That is, if it's safe." "It is, I promise." Broadtrunk leads Roger to the edge of the roof to a small platform with a covered bucket next to it. He then puts fingers to his lips, and Roger's goggles report a strong, piercing sound. Roger follows Broadtrunk's gaze out to the river, where he spots a dark form growing larger and heading in their direction. As it grows near, Roger sees that it is a winged creature about the size of a Mare Urban. The creature lands on the rooftop platform in a membranous flutter. Roger sees that it does indeed have a long, narrow snout and large erect ears like the Mare Urbans. But unlike the Mare Urbans, it has no whiskers, and its eyes are deeply set and forward-facing. Also, in contrast to the Mare Urbans, its mouth is festooned with sharp, needle-like teeth, and its arms are long, leathery wings. Roger's goggles register an exchange of piercing sounds between Broadtrunk and the Terror, after which Broadtrunk opens the bucket and removes a long floppy creature that he tosses to the Sky Terror, who catches it expertly in his teeth and swallows it whole. The Sky Terror lowers its head again and emits another set of piercing sounds, at which Broadtrunk tosses another morsel. "I raised her from a pup," the chieftain says by way of explanation. "She is not, of course, of the species that preys on people. They are much larger, fiercer, and, as you might imagine, almost extinct. Her kind preys on the creatures in the river. She's astonishing," Roger remarks. "Beautiful, in a strange way." "Yes," Broadtrunk says, stroking the Terror's lowered head. "I think so, too." He stops petting the creature to give it another bite of food, after which he produces another piercing sound and waves his hand toward the river. The Terror beats its wings and rises to fly back from whence it came. Broadtrunk watches the flight for a moment and turns back to Roger. "I'm afraid I have no refreshment to offer you," he says. "You're the first of your people to visit, and we have none of your gel or fruit." "No need for apologies," Roger says. "I have plenty of my own. In fact, that is one of the reasons I have asked to meet you. I have a quantity of nectar gel and cerulean sea salt to sell, but my greater purpose is to acquire a large vessel, I understand that Arborea produces the best. The derisive grin returns to Broadtrunk's countenance. Who told you that? Strongbow? Sensing his attempt at ingratiation may have been clumsy and transparent, Roger chooses to let embarrassed silence be his reply. No, Broadtrunk continues. Arborean technology is far from the best. We are still merely imitating our betters, although our imitations are very good. He gives Roger a pointed look. That device you're wearing, the one that allows us to talk like this, is certainly not Arborean, nor is it Aredian. Is it Cerulean? No, Roger says. I really don't know, but I think it's Nebulan. Nebulan? I didn't think there were people on Nebula, apart from those of legend. It's apparently a very small but very real and reclusive population, Roger reports with growing discomfort. This is a gift from one I've befriended. So you've met a Nebulan? This is astonishing. What are they like? I only know the one, Roger admits, but she is very friendly, very clever, and, Roger adds sadly, very secretive. She would be very unhappy to know that we were talking about her. Friendly and secretive, Broadtrunk repeats thoughtfully. That's an intriguing combination. What do they look like? Roger has to consider this question a moment. Again, I only know the one, but she could be said to resemble a cross between an Aredian and an Arborean. That sounds hideous, the chieftain looked genuinely appalled. Well, Roger is startled by the intensity of Broadtrunk's reaction. I mean that in only the most superficial sense. She has 2 legs and 2 arms, as your people and the Aredians do. She adorns her body with fabric, as your people and the Aredians do, but her skin has neither hair nor scales, except on her head. She has hair on her head. Eyes? Ears? 2 of each. In respect to her head and face, she resembles an Arborean more than an Aredian. Perhaps is my affection for her, but I find her pleasing to look at. Well, Broadtrunk says, until today I would have dismissed such a report as a tale told to children and the gullible. This is a day of many firsts. For me as well, Roger agrees. So, to the business part of your visit, Broadtrunk announces. How much nectar gel do you have? Several hundred kilos of gel and 50 kilos of sea salt. Several hundred? Don't you know exactly how much you have? Once again, Roger sees his attempt at caginess has been obvious and awkward. Well over 500 kilos, he amends. But no, I don't know exactly, as we have been dipping into our stores on our journey. And you hope to acquire a large vessel with the proceeds? Yes. May I ask why? His attempts at craftiness at this point dismal failures, Roger opts for a version of the truth. The vessel I travel in is recognized by the Aredian Deep Space Patrol. They have a high regard for admirals, he explains dryly, and I wish my comings and goings to be less noticed. The Aredians can be officious, Broadtrunk agrees. Is there any other reason you prefer not to be noticed? We Ceruleans are not as social as Arboreans. We are a private people. I simply want my business to be my own, Roger replies evenly. My motives are anything but nefarious, I assure you. Oh, of that I have no doubt, Broadtrunk assures him. He appears to think a moment. You specified it was a large vessel you are seeking. How large? Large enough to carry the Mare Urban freighter I arrived in. Broadtrunk looks at Roger curiously. I don't understand. The captain of the freighter does not want to give up her vessel. If we are to proceed more anonymously, we will need a vessel large enough to carry hers. I still don't understand, Broadtrunk says. Why don't you just hire another vessel? Roger finds himself running out of truths he can safely tell. Oh well, he says finally, the captain, Captain Forgedam, and I are friends and partners in this enterprise. This is what we have agreed to do, he concludes, if lamely. It is not wise to allow affections to dictate business decisions, or so I am told, Broadtrunk observes wryly. But as you say, your business is your own. Let me make some inquiries, he adds, leading Roger back to the hoist. I will send word to the spaceport if I learn anything useful to you. I thank you, Roger says. Oh, I almost forgot. He reaches into his haversack to produce a small box. Please accept this gift as a token of gratitude for your help. A gift? Broadtrunk accepts the box and opens it. It's Mare Urban glass. I'm told you are a collector. Yes, Broadtrunk says quietly as he holds each of the 4 glass pebbles to the light. I am indeed. Who was it that gave you that intelligence? A glass worker with a shop by the river. Rotvine is his name. Rotvine? I thought he had been sent down the river long ago, the chieftain says regretfully. I thank you, Admiral, he adds, both for your glass and for the news of an old friend. I will make some inquiries, I assure you. But I think I shall make a visit to the river first. I have been neglectful and need to make amends. I am grateful for your assistance, Roger says. I will wait your word. With that, Roger steps into the hoist, still staffed by the guide that had led him to Broadtrunk. As before, the cage jolted and began a descent. As it did so, Roger turns to his guide. Excuse me, but what does it mean to be sent down the river? The guide appears startled by the question, but regains his composure. A person is said to be sent down the river after he or she dies, the guide explains. The expression comes from our local funeral rites. The deceased is cremated and the ashes placed in a small box that is cast upon the river to be carried to the sea. I see, Roger replies. We have a similar expression on water, cerulean. We say a person has been fed to the dregs when they die, as we inter our dead in the sea as well. Yes, the guide says, as if Roger had told him water made things wet. Please watch your step when leaving the cage. The guide escorts Roger back to the street, where he finds Treevine, Shadeleaf, and Greenbark, and no one else, waiting for him. Where are my friends? He demands of the Arboreans. Strongbow was very put out by the chieftain's rudeness, Treevine replies, answering a question Roger hadn't asked. He said he had important matters to attend to and left. He told us to stay and wait for you, Shadeleaf adds. Yes, Greenbark agrees. So we waited. Yes, so I see, Roger observes with thinning patience. Where are my Mare Urban friends? I don't know, Treevine says simply. They just left without telling us where they were going, Shadeleaf reports indignantly. Yes, Greenbark concurs, but they could have told us where they were going, only we don't speak Mare Urban and wouldn't have known what they were telling us. Well, I suppose that's true, Shadeleaf says thoughtfully. Roger experiences a momentary rush of panic as the crew was nowhere in sight, and he had no desire to go looking for them with the dubious aid of what he thought of as the 3 simpletons. He took another look around and was about to order the simpletons to take him back to the spaceport when he remembered what Peregrine had told him about the tablet strapped to his arm. He looked at it and touched the appropriate symbols until Burrowson's image appeared on the screen. Ah, Mr. Roger, the image greeted him. How did it go with the chieftain? Well enough, Roger replies. Where in the great tidal swell are you? Oh, not far. We didn't know how long you would be, so we went exploring. We'll be along shortly. The screen goes dark. My friends will be along shortly, Roger informs the Arboreans as he climbs aboard the transport. Please take us back to the spaceport once they have all come aboard. True to his word, Burrowson soon appears with the rest of the crew, some of whom bear sacks of colorful fruit. We found a shopkeeper who spoke a little Mare Urban, gathered themselves Roger. She told us about these fruits and was very helpful in suggesting the ones we might like. We brought some to share around at the evening meal tonight, Lutterson adds. Well, something to look forward to, Roger replies gamely. At least some of us have accomplished something today. So that is the end of Chapter 13. Chapter 14 is titled Fire on the Water. Thanks for watching and listening. You'll see me next week with the new chapter. Bye.